Miguel Rodriguez had exactly 2 weeks to find $85,000 or lose his daughter forever. He was working 3 hours of sleep a night, cleaning Johnny Carson's studio at 2 in the morning, and crying in a storage closet when he thought no one could hear him. But someone did hear him, and what that person did next, in absolute secrecy, would stay hidden for 26 years until a locked filing cabinet revealed a truth that proved the greatest acts of kindness are the ones nobody ever knows about. 2:47 in the morning. Studio 1 at NBC Burbank was supposed to be empty. Johnny Carson had stayed late going over next week's guest list when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the darkness of a television studio. Someone was crying. Most people would have walked away. But Johnny Carson wasn't most people. He set down his coffee cup and followed the sound through the maze of cameras and cables that filled the famous Tonight Show stage. The crying was coming from somewhere backstage, near the storage area where they kept old set pieces and forgotten props. Johnny moved slowly, quietly, the way you do when you're not sure if you should be intruding on someone's private moment of pain. The sound grew louder, closer, more desperate. It was the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, the kind that a person does when they think no one can hear them, when they've finally stopped trying to hold it together. Johnny rounded the corner and found him, a man sitting on an overturned bucket in a storage closet, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders convulsing with sobs. His breath came in ragged gasps that echoed off the concrete walls. The man was wearing a janitor's uniform with a name patch stitched over the pocket, Miguel. His uniform was still damp with cleaning solution. He smelled like pine sol and exhaustion. Miguel was maybe 58, 60 years old. Gray hair, deep lines around his eyes, the kind of face that told stories without saying a word. He was clutching something against his chest, a photograph, bent at the corners from being held too tightly, too often. For a moment, Johnny just stood there. He could have backed away silently, could have gone home to his mansion in Malibu and forgotten this ever happened, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the raw honesty of the moment. Maybe he just couldn't walk away from someone in pain. Johnny cleared his throat softly. The man's head snapped up. His eyes went wide with panic and embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carson. I didn't think anyone was here. I'll go. I shouldn't be—" Johnny held up a hand gently. "Please, don't apologize, and don't go." Miguel froze, uncertain. His red-rimmed eyes darted between Johnny and the exit. Johnny took a step closer, then another, and then he did something that Miguel Rodriguez would never forget. Johnny Carson, the king of late-night television, knelt down on that cold concrete floor, eye level with a janitor he'd never met. "What's wrong, friend?" Miguel's hands trembled as he tried one more time to hide the photograph. But Johnny had already seen the pain in his eyes, and what Miguel was about to tell him would set in motion a secret that Johnny Carson would guard for the next 26 years of his life. Miguel Rodriguez hadn't always been invisible. Once, a lifetime ago, he'd been somebody. Not famous, but somebody. It took him nearly 10 minutes to find his voice, to trust that Johnny Carson wasn't going to laugh at him or walk away. So Miguel told him everything. He'd been a trumpet player in the 1950s and 60s. He'd played the jazz clubs in East Los Angeles, the smoky little venues where the real musicians went after their mainstream gigs were done, shared stages with Charlie Mingus, played backup for Dexter Gordon, almost got invited to join Dizzy Gillespie's touring band in 1962. But then he met Elena. Beautiful Elena Martinez, who came to hear him play on a Saturday night in 1963. She had a smile that could stop time. They fell in love over jazz and dreams, got married 6 months later. And Miguel made a choice. Elena was pregnant with their daughter. Dizzy's tour would have meant 6 months on the road, so Miguel stayed home. I took a job at a furniture factory, built a life. A normal, beautiful, ordinary life. They named their daughter Rosa. Elena worked as a seamstress. Miguel worked the factory during the week and played trumpet on Saturdays. They weren't rich, but they were happy. Then, 10 years ago, Elena got sick. The cancer came fast and took her even faster. The medical bills buried Miguel alive. He sold everything except his trumpet because Elena made him promise not to sell that. She passed away on a Tuesday morning in March of 1969. Rosa was 9 years old. Miguel fell apart. I couldn't play music anymore. He worked 3 jobs to pay off the medical debt, slept 4 hours a night for years, eventually pawned his trumpet because he needed to buy Rosa's school supplies. The factory closed in 1976. Miguel took the janitorial job at NBC because it was close to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. His shifts started at midnight. He'd clean Studio 1 and the hallways and the offices, finish around 3, then work a day shift at a warehouse in Van Nuys, every single day, 7 days a week, for 3 years now. Rosa was 19 now, beautiful and smart, and everything Miguel and Elena had dreamed she'd be. The photograph Miguel was holding showed her smiling, healthy, full of life. Miguel paused. There was something else he hadn't told Johnny yet, something that made everything worse. "Is that your daughter?" Johnny asked quietly. Miguel nodded, his voice breaking. 3 weeks ago, everything changed, and now I have 2 weeks left to save her life. Johnny leaned forward. "Tell me what happened, Miguel." 2 weeks. That's all Miguel had left. 2 weeks to find $85,000 or lose his daughter forever, not to the injury, to the system, to the cold mathematics of American healthcare. May 8, 1979. Rosa had stayed late at the library studying for her final exam. Physical therapy program, top of her class. Already offered a position at a rehabilitation center in Santa Monica. Everything she'd worked for was finally coming true. She left the library at 9:30, 15-minute walk to her apartment, safe neighborhood, well-lit streets. She never saw the car coming. The driver had been drinking. He ran a red light at Wilshire and Westwood Boulevard going 50 miles an hour in a 35 zone. Rosa was in the crosswalk. The impact threw her 20 feet. Witnesses said the driver didn't even stop. Rosa was rushed to Cedars-Sinai, spinal damage, traumatic brain injury. Miguel got the call at 2 in the morning. He was at the hospital in 12 minutes. For 2 weeks, Rosa was in a coma. Miguel sat beside her bed every single hour he wasn't working. He held her hand, played recordings of her mama's favorite songs, prayed, bargained with God. On the 14th day, she woke up. Miguel wept with relief. She was alive. When Rosa woke up from the coma, her first words were, "Papa, where's my cap and gown?" Miguel had to tell his daughter that her graduation had happened without her. Rosa looked down at her legs. "I tried to move them. Couldn't." And then she said the thing that broke Miguel completely. "I'm supposed to help people walk. Now I can't even walk by myself." "What kind of physical therapist can't walk, Papa?" But the doctors explained there was hope, an experimental procedure. A specialist in Boston had developed a new technique, spinal fusion combined with nerve regeneration therapy. Patients were walking again. But it was experimental. Miguel's insurance said no. The cost was $85,000. Miguel made $8.50 an hour at NBC, $12 an hour at the warehouse. At his current pace, it would take him 8 years to save enough. The doctor said the longer they waited, the less likely the surgery would work, and the hospital had given him a deadline. 2 weeks to pay, or they'd have to discharge her to a long-term care facility. Miguel looked at Johnny, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do. I work every hour I can. I eat 1 meal a day. I've sold everything I own, and it's not enough. My daughter is lying in that hospital, and I can't save her." Miguel wiped his face, ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carson. I just needed to cry somewhere no one would see me. Tomorrow I go back to work. That's all I can do." What Miguel didn't know was that tomorrow, Johnny Carson would make a phone call that would change everything. Johnny Carson sat down on the floor next to Miguel, the king of late-night television sitting on cold concrete at 3 in the morning. And then he did something he rarely did. He listened. Not the way you listen when you're waiting for your turn to talk. Really listened. The way you listen when someone's sharing a piece of their soul. Miguel tried to apologize again. "Mr. Carson, I shouldn't have broken down like this." "I want to," Johnny interrupted gently. "Tell me about jazz. You said you played trumpet?" Miguel looked surprised that Johnny cared. "Yeah, nothing special, just small clubs mostly. But you played with some incredible musicians. Charlie Mingus, Dexter Gordon." Miguel's eyes lit up. "Do you know about them?" Johnny smiled. "I know enough to know you were good. Really good. You don't share a stage with legends unless you belong there. I had one shot. Dizzy Gillespie heard me play at a club in '62. He needed a backup trumpet for his European tour. 6 months. Good money. A real break. What happened? Elena was pregnant. I couldn't leave her alone for 6 months, so I stayed. And you never regretted it? Not for 1 second. Rosa was worth more than 1,000 tours. Johnny nodded slowly. That's real success, the kind that matters. Do you still play? I pawned my trumpet 4 years ago. I needed money for Rosa's textbooks. Johnny was quiet for a moment. Johnny asked one more question. The answer would change everything. What did Rosa want to study? Miguel's voice cracked. Physical therapy. She wanted to help people who couldn't walk. She'd say, Papa, I want to give people their lives back. And now she's the one who can't walk. Johnny understood something at that moment. They were different men from different worlds, but in the most important ways, they were the same. Miguel started to stand up. I should let you go home, Mr. Carson. It's late. Wait. Johnny's voice was firm but kind. What's your last name again? Rodriguez. Miguel Rodriguez. And Rosa is at Cedar Sinai? Yes, sir. Room 412. Miguel looked confused. Why? Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook and pen. I need your home address and phone number. Mr. Carson, I don't understand. Just write it down for me, please. Miguel's hand shook as he wrote. He handed it to Johnny. Johnny folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Johnny said quietly. Go home and get some sleep, Miguel. What Miguel didn't know was that Johnny would never sleep that night. By sunrise, he'd make a decision that would stay secret for 26 years. Johnny Carson went home that night and couldn't sleep. At 6 in the morning, he called his accountant. At 8 in the morning, he called his lawyer. By noon, he'd made a decision that he'd take to his grave. Most people don't know this about Johnny Carson. They knew the performer. But they didn't know John William Carson, the man whose father had worked in a power plant for 40 years. Homer Carson, a good man whose hands were scarred from labor and whose dreams had faded somewhere between paying bills and raising 4 sons. Johnny remembered his father's funeral. Homer had wanted to be an electrical engineer, had the brains for it, never had the money for college. So he worked at the power plant in Norfolk, Nebraska until his heart gave out. Johnny was already famous by then, already wealthy, and he remembered thinking, I could have helped him. Why didn't I ask what he needed? That regret lived in Johnny for decades. Johnny made his first call. Harold, I need you to wire $85,000 to Cedar Sinai Medical Center today. Harold Luftig, his accountant, didn't ask questions. It's for a patient. Rosa Rodriguez. Room 412. Spinal surgery. Whatever she needs for as long as she needs it. And Harold, this is anonymous. Completely anonymous. Set it up through one of the medical charities we donate to. Johnny, are you sure? She's not a friend. I've never met her. And she's never going to know I helped. That's the point. Johnny sat at his desk, pen hovering over the authorization. Part of him wanted to hand the check to Miguel directly. But Johnny had learned something over 30 years on television. The moment you do something for recognition, it stops being kind and becomes performance. This had to be pure, anonymous, a miracle with no strings attached. Because Miguel didn't need a savior he'd feel indebted to. He needed to believe the universe saw him and decided he mattered. Then he called his lawyer, Henry Bushkin. Henry, I need you to set something up, a trust, ongoing medical expenses for Rosa Rodriguez at Cedars. If the surgery works and she needs rehab, physical therapy, medical equipment, I want it covered. For life, if necessary. The trust can't have my name on it. How much are we talking? Whatever it takes. There's no cap. Henry, if the father finds out it was me, it'll ruin it. This has to be a miracle, not a favor. By 2 in the afternoon, everything was arranged. Johnny picked up the phone one more time. This is Johnny Carson. I'm calling about a patient named Rosa Rodriguez. I'm setting up a donation for her surgery through the Eisner Medical Foundation. She gets whatever she needs. The administrator was stunned. Mr. Carson, this is incredibly generous. Can we acknowledge? No. The family doesn't know it's me. They never know. It's an anonymous donor. That's all they're ever told. Miguel was emptying trash cans in Studio 1 when his supervisor found him. Rodriguez, you have a phone call. Emergency. Miguel's heart stopped. He ran to the office phone. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the receiver. Hello? This is Miguel Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, this is Patricia Hayes, the hospital administrator at Cedars-Sinai. I'm calling about your daughter, Rosa. Miguel's breath caught. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine. Actually, I have extraordinary news. We've received a donation to cover Rosa's surgery. Full payment. The procedure is scheduled for next Tuesday. Miguel went completely still. I don't understand. There must be a mistake. No mistake, sir. An anonymous donor contacted us through the Eisner Medical Foundation. The entire $85,000 has been transferred. Surgery, hospital stay, physical therapy, all of it. Completely covered. Miguel's knees buckled. He grabbed the desk to stay standing. The phone receiver slipped from his hand. His supervisor rushed over as Miguel collapsed into the chair, his whole body shaking with sobs. Who? Miguel finally managed. Who would do this? The donor requested complete anonymity. They simply said they wanted to help. Miguel covered his face with both hands. Can I thank them? They were very clear. No contact. They just want Rosa to get well. She's going to walk again, Mr. Rodriguez. She's really going to walk. Rosa was staring at the ceiling of her hospital room when her father burst through the door an hour later, his face wet with tears. What's wrong? She asked, terrified. Papa, what happened? Nothing's wrong, mija. Miguel's voice broke. Everything's right. You're getting your surgery. You're going to walk again. How? We don't have the money. An angel, Miguel whispered. Somewhere out there, we have an angel who believes in you. That night, Miguel was mopping the hallway near the studio when he saw Johnny Carson walking toward the exit. Johnny stopped. Hey, Miguel. How are you doing tonight? Miguel's eyes immediately welled up. Mr. Carson, I have to tell you something. An anonymous donor paid for my daughter's surgery. All of it. $85,000. The hospital called today. Rosa gets her surgery next week. She's going to walk again. Johnny's face showed exactly the right amount of surprise. That's wonderful, Miguel. That's really wonderful. I don't know who it was. I'll never know. But somewhere out there, someone believes in my daughter. Johnny put his hand on Miguel's shoulder. Someone out there must believe in you too. I'm going to work every day for the rest of my life to deserve this. If I ever find out who did this, I'll spend my life repaying them. Johnny's face flickered for just a second. Some debts aren't meant to be repaid, Miguel. Miguel didn't catch the deeper meaning. But we did. You already are worthy, Miguel. You already are. And then Johnny Carson walked out into the California night, and Miguel Rodriguez never suspected for a single moment that his miracle had been standing right in front of him. 3 months later, Miguel found an envelope taped to his locker. Inside was a claim ticket from Garcia's pawn shop on Sunset Boulevard and a note that said, "Every musician deserves a second chance." Miguel drove to Garcia's pawn shop. The owner, Roberto Garcia, looked up from behind the counter. "Help you?" Miguel handed him the claim ticket. "I found this. I think maybe there's a mistake." Roberto disappeared into the back room. He came out carrying a worn trumpet case, black leather scratched from years of use. Miguel's breath caught. That was his case. "You, Miguel Rodriguez?" "Yes, someone paid off your ticket plus 4 years of interest, and they paid to have it restored too." Roberto opened the case. What Miguel saw inside made him gasp. His trumpet, but gleaming. Perfect. Every valve professionally cleaned and oiled. The brass polished until it shone like gold. It looked better than the day he'd bought it new in 1957. Who did this? Don't know. Guy came in 3 months ago. Paid cash. There was another note inside. Studio B at NBC is empty Thursdays at midnight. The soundproofing is excellent. Play. That Thursday night, Miguel found Studio B empty and quiet. He sat down, opened the case, and lifted out his trumpet. He put the mouthpiece to his lips. His first note cracked. His lips trembled. Rust and memory fighting each other. But then muscle memory kicked in. His fingers found the valves. His breath found the rhythm. Tears streamed down his face. Not sad tears, but the kind you cry when you remember who you used to be. The notes started coming faster, stronger. What Miguel didn't know was that Johnny Carson was in the control room above Studio B, watching, listening. Johnny had arranged everything. Over the next months, it became Miguel's routine. Janitorial work until 3, then Studio B until 5, and his playing got better, stronger. The rust fell away. The joy came back. Meanwhile, Rosa was making her own recovery. The surgery had worked. She was walking with a walker now, taking steps. She'd enrolled in physical therapy school, 2 recoveries happening at once. Rosa's body heals, Miguel's soul healing. One Thursday night, Miguel played a solo that would have made Dizzy Gillespie proud. When he finished, he whispered into the empty studio, "Thank you, whoever you are." In the control room, Johnny Carson smiled and quietly left. But Miguel's story was far from over. June 1981, 2 years after that night in the storage closet. Johnny Carson was planning something he'd never done before. Johnny called his producers into his office. "I want to do a jazz segment. Real jazz. I want to find someone undiscovered. Someone talented who never got their shot." What Johnny didn't tell them was that he'd been listening to Miguel Rodriguez play in Studio B for almost 2 years now, and Johnny had decided it was time for Miguel to have what Dizzy Gillespie had almost given him in 1962, a real chance. But it had to look natural, so Johnny orchestrated a performance. He contacted Tommy Newsom, a jazz musician he trusted. "Tommy, there's a guy, plays at a little club in East LA. I want you to go hear him. If he's as good as I think he is, offer him a spot on the show. Johnny, why don't you just book him yourself?" Because he didn't know it came from me. "Please, Tommy, just trust me." Johnny paid for Miguel to have a one-night gig at a small jazz club in Boyle Heights, made sure Miguel got the call, made sure Tommy Newsom would be in the audience. "Mr. Rodriguez, we have an opening this Saturday night, 3 sets. Can you do it?" Miguel hadn't played publicly in almost 20 years, but he said yes. That Saturday, Miguel played his heart out. Tommy approached him after. "That was incredible. I'm Tommy Newsom. I work with the Tonight Show band. We're looking for a guest musician. Would you be interested?" Miguel thought it was a joke. "The Tonight Show? Me? You're serious. You deserve to be heard. I'm 58 years old. I clean floors for a living. I'm nobody. You're somebody who can play like that. That's all that matters. Are you in?" Miguel thought about Rosa, about the miracles that had happened, about second chances. "Yes, I'm in." Rosa insisted on coming to the taping. She was walking with a cane now. "Papa, I wouldn't miss this for anything." The night of the taping, Miguel stood backstage at Studio 1, the same studio he'd cleaned 1,000 times. But now he is here as a musician. Johnny saw him in the hallway. "You're going to be great out there." The warm-up comedian finished. The band played the theme. Johnny did his monologue. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have something special for you tonight. Please welcome jazz trumpeter Miguel Rodriguez." Miguel walked onto that famous stage, trumpet in hand. 20 million people were watching. Miguel's hands were shaking so badly backstage that he could barely hold his trumpet. When the curtain opened, every note he'd practiced vanished from his mind. His first note came out wrong, flat, weak. His second note was worse. Panic flooded through him. Then he caught Johnny's eye. Johnny gave him the smallest nod, and something in Miguel settled. He closed his eyes, thought of Elena, of Rosa, of second chances, and when he played the third note, it was perfect. Miguel played Round Midnight, Thelonious Monk's masterpiece. By the second verse, something took over. The studio disappeared. Miguel was back in those East LA jazz clubs with Elena watching from the front row. When he hit the final note and let it fade into silence, the audience erupted. Standing ovation, a real one. Doc Severinsen stood up from his place in the band and saluted Miguel. "That meant you belonged." Johnny walked over. "That was extraordinary." "Miguel, that was really extraordinary. Sit down." "So Miguel, tell us, how long have you been playing?" "Since I was 14 years old, sir. And you've been doing this professionally?" "I used to. A long time ago. I had some good years." "What happened?" "Life happened. I had a daughter. Lost my wife. I had to make choices. So the music stopped for a while." "But it came back?" "It came back because of miracles, Mr. Carson. 2 years ago, my daughter Rosa was injured in an accident. She needed surgery we couldn't afford. And then an anonymous donor paid for everything. $85,000. Someone we'll never meet saved my daughter's life. The audience made a collective sound. Sympathy. And that wasn't all. Someone found my trumpet. I'd pawned it years ago, but somebody tracked it down, had it restored, and gave it back to me. Just a note that said every musician deserves a second chance. Johnny's face was carefully neutral, but if you looked closely, you could see something in his eyes. What did these miracles teach you? That I matter, that Rosa matters, that even when you think you're invisible, somebody sees you. The audience applauded. Johnny asked a few more questions, then thanked Miguel. But the story didn't end there. 11 years later, May 1992, Johnny's assistant, Lisa Chen, was going through old files, archiving decades of paperwork. Lisa found a locked cabinet hidden behind a fake panel in Johnny's desk. She had to pry it open with a letter opener. Inside were folders marked private in Johnny's handwriting. Lisa almost put them back, but something made her open the first one. What she saw made her hands start trembling. Payment receipts, hospital bills, a payment to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, May 1979, $85,000. Recipient, Rosa Rodriguez. Another payment, Garcia's Pawn Shop, Trumpet Restoration. Recipient, Miguel Rodriguez. Another payment, Tommy Newsom, Talent Scouting Fee. Target, Miguel Rodriguez. And there were more, years of payments, all coming from Johnny's personal accounts, all marked private, all carefully hidden. Lisa sat on the floor of Johnny's office and cried, understanding for the first time who Johnny Carson really was. She showed the records to Fred Dordova, the show's longtime producer. Fred looked at them and closed his eyes. Does he know about this? If he wanted anyone to know, Fred said quietly, he would have told us. Put them back. This isn't our story to tell. And Miguel Rodriguez, now 69 years old, playing jazz festivals and teaching music to kids in East LA, never knew that every good thing that had happened to him in the last 13 years had come from the same man who'd knelt beside him in a storage closet and asked, "What's wrong, friend?" April 2005. Rosa Rodriguez, now Dr. Rosa Rodriguez, was watching the news when she saw it. Johnny Carson had passed away. She started crying. I don't know, she said. I just feel like we lost someone important. Miguel nodded. Me too. Rosa had become everything her mama had dreamed. She ran a rehabilitation center in Santa Monica, specializing in spinal injuries. Patients who couldn't afford care got treated anyway. Pro bono work, every week. Giving back what had been given to her. Miguel had his own renaissance. He recorded 2 albums, played jazz festivals, taught trumpet to kids who couldn't afford lessons, started an anonymous scholarship fund called the Second Chance Music Fund. 3 weeks after Johnny's passing, Miguel got a call from a lawyer. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm handling Mr. Carson's estate. He left something for you, a letter. Miguel's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Dear Miguel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and it's finally time you knew the truth. I was the anonymous donor who paid for Rosa's surgery. I found your trumpet and had it restored. I arranged for Tommy Newsom to hear you play. I got you on The Tonight Show. All of it was me. I know you're probably shocked, but I need you to understand why I kept it secret. That night I found you crying. You reminded me of my father, a good man who worked his whole life and never got to chase his dreams. I couldn't help my father, but I could help you. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted you to believe in miracles, to believe that the universe saw you and decided you mattered. Because you do matter, Miguel. You gave me something more valuable than I gave you. You gave me purpose. You reminded me that success means nothing if we don't use it to help others. Watching you reclaim your music, watching Rosa walk again, that meant more to me than any ratings or awards ever could. Keep playing, keep teaching those kids, keep being proof that invisible people deserve to be seen. Your friend, Johnny. Miguel sat in his living room holding that letter and wept, grateful tears, understanding tears. He thought about every Thursday night in Studio B, every kind word Johnny had given him. It had all been love. Quiet, secret, generous love. Rosa read the letter too, and she understood. The anonymous donor who'd saved her life had cared enough to stay hidden so she could feel worthy of the miracle. The miracles multiplied. Miguel's students went on to teach others. Rosa's patients became advocates. The love spread outward in ripples that would never stop. We live in a world that celebrates the loud, the famous, But the real heroes are the quiet ones. The Johnny Carsons who help in secret. The Miguel Rodriguezes who work 2 jobs to save their daughters. The Rosa Rodriguezes who turn their pain into purpose. On that night in 1979, Johnny Carson could have walked past that storage closet, could have ignored the sound of a man crying. But he stopped, he listened, he cared, and because of that, a daughter walked. My father played music again, somewhere. A child who couldn't afford a trumpet got one anyway. Because that's what love does. It multiplies, it echoes, it changes everything. Miguel and Rosa never knew the truth until Johnny was gone. But that's exactly how Johnny wanted it, because real kindness doesn't need recognition. If this story reminded you that the most important people aren't always the most famous ones, hit that like button. Subscribe for more hidden stories about the human moments behind Hollywood's biggest legends. And drop a comment telling us about a time someone helped you when you needed it most, because those stories matter just as much as this one. The notification bell's right there. Miguel's story started with someone caring enough to listen. Yours might too.